Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep today into something you see literally every day, but probably don't think much about: U.S. national mottos.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Specifically, E pluribus unum and In God We Trust.
Right. Yeah.
And you might be surprised to hear that In God We Trust wasn't always the motto.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's start with E pluribus unum. What does that even mean?
It's Latin
Okay.
for out of many, one.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that it actually pops up way back in ancient Roman writing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the poet Virgil actually used it in a poem
Okay.
describing a recipe of all things.
Really?
A recipe.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Okay.
But the basic idea that you're taking all these different parts and making them into a single whole,
Yeah.
that really resonated
I could see that.
throughout history and into the founding of the U.S.
So how did this ancient Roman phrase become so important to America?
Well, imagine you're a founding father.
Back in the late 1700s, you've got 13 colonies, each with their own history and identity, trying to become one nation.
Right.
You need a motto that gets that across.
Yeah, for sure.
E pluribus unum was perfect for that moment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Symbolized creating a single nation out of all these different states.
And it wasn't just words either, right? You had the great seal with the eagle holding the banner that says E pluribus unum.
Absolutely. That visual, I mean,
So powerful.
it was everywhere
Yeah.
on official documents, everyday objects. Just a constant reminder of unity,
And strength.
especially for a new nation
Right.
that's trying to find its footing.
For sure. Okay, so E pluribus unum represents unity, right?
Yes.
But then it kind of takes a backseat to In God We Trust. And I know that happened during the Civil War,
Right.
but how did that shift even come about?
Yeah, well, the Civil War,
Such a crazy time.
it was a time of just huge uncertainty.
The country was divided.
Yeah, literally tearing itself apart.
Yeah.
So back in 1861, a minister named M.R. Watkinson wrote to the Treasury Secretary and suggested that
Okay.
adding God to U.S. coins could really help
Interesting.
boost morale and offer people some comfort.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
People needed something to believe in.
Right.
So I'm assuming they just put it on like all the most important coins, right?
Not exactly.
Okay.
It actually first appeared on the 2-cent piece.
What?
Yeah, in 1864.
A 2-cent piece? That's a weird place to start.
It might seem that way,
Yeah.
but people responded really well to it.
Okay.
They saw it as this unifying thing
Right.
in the middle of all this chaos and division.
Yeah, for sure.
So gradually it started to show up on more coins, but it didn't become the official national motto until much later.
Gotcha. I'm guessing, though, not everyone was super happy about mixing religious language with U.S. currency.
Oh yeah, there were definitely concerns
Right. Especially back then.
about separation of church and state. Some people argued that putting In God We Trust on coins went against the First Amendment.
Makes sense.
They felt like the government shouldn't be endorsing a certain religion.
Especially on something like money that everyone uses.
Exactly.
So what did the government do about those concerns?
It ended up in the courts.
Of course it did.
And the Supreme Court finally ruled that the motto was mainly patriotic and didn't mean they were establishing a religion.
Okay.
The court said that the phrase was more about acknowledging this historical tradition of a higher power,
Interesting.
rather than forcing specific beliefs on anyone.
It's a fascinating distinction.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it foreshadowed this whole debate about In God We Trust in a secular society.
A debate that's still going on.
Yeah, but that's a story for another time.
Okay, so we have E pluribus unum representing unity even with all this diversity, and then In God We Trust coming out of this time of national crisis. How did the story of these mottos play out as America moved into the 20th century?
That's where things get even more interesting. The story of In God We Trust takes this whole other turn during the Cold War, when anxieties about communism and atheism were super high.
Let me guess. In God We Trust becomes this way to separate America from the atheist Soviet Union.
You got it. There was this big push to make In God We Trust the national motto. Supporters said it was this vital way to show off America's spiritual foundation
Right.
and to be different from those godless communists. It was symbolic, declaring America's moral high ground, in this global ideological battle.
Wow.
Yeah,
And did they actually succeed? Did In God We Trust actually become the official motto?
it did. In 1956, President Eisenhower signed a bill officially making In God We Trust the national motto.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it was really popular back then, seen as this patriotic thing that
Right.
showed America's faith and values.
So it went from a 2-cent piece to the motto of the whole country. That's quite a journey for a phrase born in the Civil War.
It is.
But I can't imagine it just stopped all those concerns about the separation of church and state.
No, no, not at all. Actually, it made them even stronger, which brings us up to now, where we're still debating in God we trust and what it means for religion, identity, and national values in America today.
Yeah, it's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
We'll dive more into all that in part 2. But first, I'm curious what you think. How do these two mottos, E Pluribus Unum and In God We Trust, reflect different sides of American identity?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
They might seem like totally separate, even opposite ideas,
Right.
but maybe there's a deeper connection.
Yeah.
Maybe they actually complement each other
Yeah.
in showing how complex American history and aspirations really are. We'll get into that more in part 2.
We were talking about In God We Trust becoming the official motto, but the debate didn't just stop there, did it?
No, not at all. Those concerns about separating church and state, they didn't just go away. Especially as the motto started showing up more, like you see it on money and government buildings, even some schools,
Right.
it led to even more legal challenges.
So it wasn't just like a theoretical debate anymore, it was going to court.
Exactly. And it forced judges to deal with some really tricky questions.
Like what?
Well, like if you display In God We Trust in a public school,
Yeah.
does that violate the First Amendment rights of students who aren't from that religion or don't have a religion at all?
That's a tough one. So how did the courts handle that?
Well, the Supreme Court actually upheld using In God We Trust on money.
Oh, okay.
Back in the 70s, they said it was ceremonial and patriotic.
Oh, okay.
They said it wasn't really about pushing religion, but recognizing a tradition.
So basically they said it's history, not religion.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop the debate. Lower courts have gone back and forth on whether you could display it in places like courthouses or classrooms.
Oh, so it's kind of all over the place.
It depends on the situation and how they present the motto.
Okay. I can see how that would get confusing. What about public opinion? Has that changed at all?
It's hard to say. Polls show most Americans still, like the motto for a lot of people, it's a key part of being American, believing in God and having shared values.
But America's a lot more diverse than it was back then.
Oh, absolutely. And a growing number of people, like atheists or people from different faiths,
Right.
they think it leaves them out,
Yeah.
saying you have to believe in God to be a real American.
It's interesting how something meant to unify can actually divide people.
It really is.
Is there any way to bring those two sides together?
Well, some people say it's important to remember the context. It came from a time of crisis.
Right.
And it was supposed to be comforting and bring people together.
So we shouldn't just look at it through today's lens.
Exactly. We need to see it in its historical context. But then others say, In God We Trust might have made sense back then, but maybe it's time for something new.
Like what?
Like a motto that's more inclusive, that represents everyone's beliefs and values.
I guess there aren't any easy answers, huh?
Not really.
Just like with those early debates about E Pluribus Unum,
Yeah.
we're still figuring out what it means to be American.
And how our mottos reflect that.
Exactly. And how those ideas are always changing.
And that's what's so cool about all this.
Yeah.
It's not just about words,
Yeah.
it's about understanding ourselves and how we fit into the world.
Right. It's like history is happening right now.
It is.
It's not just in textbooks.
Exactly.
So as we head into the last part of our deep dive, I want to ask you, dear listener, something to think about. If you could choose a new motto for America today, something that shows what it means to be American in the 21st century, what would it be?
Wow, that's a big question.
Isn't it? It's like we're trying to sum up an entire country in just a phrase or two.
Yeah, and we've seen how E Pluribus Unum and In God We Trust each came about at a certain time,
Right.
and they show what was important back then, the challenges and hopes of that era.
So, for us today, what would our motto be? What would a 21st century motto look like?
Would it be about unity, with everything so divided right now?
Right.
Or maybe about how to deal with all this change that's happening?
Yeah.
Do we focus on how diverse America is, or on the things we all have in common?
It makes you wonder what we really value as a country. What does it mean to be American right now?
And it's not just about laws and court cases like we talked about with In God We Trust.
Yeah.
It's about how we see ourselves as a nation, who we are and what we want to become.
It's like we're all looking inward together.
Yeah.
So if we
Yeah.
could pick a motto that shows our values and what we're striving for, what would it say?
I'm really curious what our listeners would come up with. What speaks to them? What's their vision of America?
It's a great thing to think about because it's easy to forget about these mottos.
Right. They're just words on a coin or a building.
But they mean so much, they have real power.
Yeah. They reflect everything we've been through.
Our struggles and victories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by really thinking about these mottos, maybe we can figure out how to move forward.
Yeah, and build a future that lives up to the best of what America can be.
Right.
Well, it's been amazing exploring the history of these U.S. mottos with you.
It has.
From the unity of E Pluribus Unum to all the complexities of In God We Trust.
Yeah.
We've really uncovered a lot of meaning, and I hope we've got everyone thinking.
Me too. I hope everyone listening has a better understanding, not just of the phrases, but of America itself.
Yeah, because it's always changing.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those brain waves buzzing.